Hi, folks. It's Saturday night. It was a horrific week this week in America. I think everyone killed everyone in America. These guys it came out of crawled out of the woodwork and started killing people. And there were videos of it. There were videos all over the place of people killing each other. And it was just horrifying. Though I got to say, that happens in other weeks also, but only some of the videos make the newspapers. Only sometimes do they. I mean, there are in America there are I guess 11,000 gun killings a year. That may be a statistic from a couple of years ago, but 11,000 gun murders a year, and we only get the big spectacular ones that can be politicized. We only get the killings that you can turn where the Democrats can say it's your fault, Republicans, or where the Republicans can say it's your fault, Democrats, or say it's our information and the way we look at the world is driven by politics today, and it's just that's the worst of it, I think. No, of course that's not the worst of it. The worst of it is that there is actual horror and murder being done in a horrible, horrible way. And of course, that's who we are, right? That's kind of human life. Human life is we are not nice people. We are not good people. We strive to be good. This is true. We have this divine spark within us to be good. That's true. But the overwhelming instinct of us is still to murder the guy. So I was thinking about storytelling this week, not about politics. I try to keep away from politics. And in one of my classes, when I was doing a writing class, I kind of got into, I kind of fell into like kind of first, in phrases and in it's subjunctive clauses, into woke politics. And then some of my students noticed it and said, it's annoying when you kind of half talk about politics and about your political opinions, and you kind of let it kind of slide in there on the side, but it never becomes a real discussion. And so, and I apologize because, in our class, we're learning to tell stories and not to talk about politics. And the storytelling is the important thing, and the politics is the nonsense. But I just can't help myself sometimes, and so I try to split the two and keep the two separate. But the reason I was thinking about storytelling this week was because the following. I listened to two. I don't really read books. I listen to audiobooks while I'm walking or doing on the treadmill or whatever, bullshit. And the two audiobooks, which are not actually audiobooks, two audiobooks I listened to were the so-called Great Courses. There was a series of audio recordings which they go into universities and they record certain university courses, lectures series, 14 hours of lecture series. And they're really good. And one was by John McWhorter, a great linguist, or an excellent linguist, and he writes books, and he does a column in the New York Times, kind of a conservative. He's a conservative, one of the conservative New York Times columnists, and he writes about language and about language use today in politics and all that. And he wrote recently a really good column actually about the origins of Broadway. I mean, the black, or he's black, and so that also comes in every once in a while, and he wrote a column about the black origins of Broadway. And of course, there's nothing whiter than Broadway. It's the great white way. Broadway is very white, and but one of the earliest Broadway shows that kind of gave Broadway a push to become what it is today was a kind of a black ragtime show called. Now I don't know what it is. Now I know what it's called. What was it? Oh, but anyway, you can see it on YouTube. Maybe I'll put in the link. I'll try to look it up and put in the description. There are links to the show on YouTube, and there are some great songs in it. One of the great songs is called if you ain't been vamped by a brown skin, I assume brown skin means not, means black person, right? If you ain't been vamped by a brown skin, you ain't been vamped at all. And it's kind of like a ragtimey, this is old time jazz. This is jazz before it was jazz, when it was hot music, was hot. Louis Armstrong in his early days, he called his music in New Orleans, when he was still playing in New Orleans, it was hot music. And it has a certain kind of, not quite Dixieland, not quite ragtime, but somewhere in between there, and it's great music. Outdated, of course. It's old, but it's still great music. And that was a great song. You look it up on YouTube, but the title is something like, "If you ain't been vamped by a brown skin, you ain't been vamped at all." And that's one of the big songs from that musical, and which I had never heard about, and I read it in this column, and I loved it. I'm gay for John McWhorter, basically. I love the guy, and okay, so I listened to one of his courses, and it was just a general course about linguistics. I haven't been studying linguistics, since I was a kid, right? And so I returned to linguistics, and I listened to the general course, and it was so great to be listening and talking and thinking about linguistics again, which is such a great course, study subject of our humanity. It says so much about us, how language evolves, and it's a great course. It's called I don't know, John McWhorter. He did several courses on the Great Course series. It's called, Origins of Our Language or something like that. If you look it up, it's really good. And he's written several good books if you're interested in books on language. And then I listened to another great course called something like The Origin of the Species Based on Evolutionary Primate, Study of Primates, Biological Anthropology. And so, it's like Diane Fossey and Jane Goodall. And they go out and they study the habits of apes, what great apes do, were not our ancestors, by the way, which was one of these interesting things, which I think I knew, but which was in the lecture series, and it kind of called me to mind. They are a parallel species. The monkeys, the great apes, the gorillas, the chimpanzees, and the whatever we were, Cro-Magnon man. The species that later became Homo sapiens, and so we evolved from the same family. So they are brothers and sisters, but they're not. We didn't evolve from them. We and the great apes evolved from the same family. So that's just and she talks about the use of tools among mainly great apes. And great apes are, I guess, chimpanzees, orangutans, and gorillas, I believe, something like that. And so the use of tools and the use of language, how they communicate with each other. It's not language yet, it's communication. And sociality, how they, interact with each other, how they teach each other, they learn. And it's very limited sometimes. Learning is very limited. Sometimes they don't actually teach each other. Or at least unintentionally, it's very primitive. And the whole thing is, all these things, they have some of these things, like the use of tools, that they don't use tools to make other tools. That's a different step in evolution, which we achieved. They did not. But they make tools out of things that are, a leaf. They use the leaf to gather water, right? So that's making a tool and using a tool. But they don't use, one rock to sharpen another rock to make it sharp. They just use the rock, and if it's sharp, it's good. It's a useful rock, and if it's not sharp, it's not that useful. But they don't use one rock to make another rock. That's using tools to make other tools. That's different. And so we talked about this, and all this from school, so this is basic stuff, and this is stuff that I haven't thought about since college, and it was great to think about it and learn about it. But halfway through, I was thinking, my God, this is at a really primitive level. This is what the apes can do. It's fascinating that they can do kind of in an abstract way everything that we do. So you can see that this instinct for doing that was already there. That's fascinating, but it's very simple. It's incredibly simple. And it's boring. In the end, it's boring. It's fascinating in an academic kind of intellectual way, but in the end, it's boring. If you think, you're going back, how many million years, from between the original, proto human ape kind of humans, and they took, they needed a million years to discover fire, and then another million years to discover the wheel, and then need another, 100,000, 500,000 years to figure out how to plow, to plant seeds and agriculture, So all these steps in the evolution up to who we are now, it took a long, long time. And from our perspective, it's fascinating that it took so long time, and it's fascinating that we, as humans, as we see what humanity is now, is such a little period of time, and all the time before that was so long. But if you think about it, all of that was really boring. I mean, when humanity does not become more interesting than cats until, I don't know, the Sumerians or something, until they start, making not even the Sumerians, frankly. I mean, these early Mesopotamian, civilizations, they had cities, they had wheels, they had, states, they had laws, they had all these things that civilization has, right? But they didn't do much with it. I mean, they didn't. Did they make a great progress in the question of male female relations? I don't know. Did they had the Epic of Gilgamesh, but I read the Epic of Gilgamesh. It was quite a while ago. It wasn't that great. It was interesting as a document, because it's the first, written work of fiction. But it's not as good. It's not as good as the stories of the Bible. It's not as good as the great Greek, dramas, Oedipus and Antigone's and all these guys. It's not Aristotle. It's interesting, but it's not really great. It's not something that will change your life. And I've read Greek plays that changed the way I look at the world. When I read, Oedipus in school, I didn't know that was possible. I was a young kid, right? In high school, read Oedipus and he kills his father and marries his mother. Oh my God! Are you serious? You can't write, dude. You can't write that down. First of all, you can't think it. I'm amazed that you would think such a thing. Secondly, you can't write it down. But these old Greek guys, they thought it and they wrote it down. And that is fascinating. That is interesting. And from that point on, things get interesting. So it's from the point of maybe, I don't know, Homer or maybe the Bible. Those are these interesting things, these storytelling things where the human life becomes interesting. And before that, it was maybe cool. The Hittites and their chariots, when the great Assyrian gates with these, half lion, half man with the big beards and all that, and the Sphinx and the pyramids. All that is fascinating. It's great. It's, looks good, but it's not. It didn't beyond style. Even the Nazis had style. I mean, style is, visually it's interesting, but it wasn't really brilliant. It wasn't really interesting until, Homer or something like that. And that was not that long ago. Homer was long ago, but the Greeks, the Romans, that's when things got interesting. And then after that, things went really fast. And now we have, not only the car, not only going to the moon, we have the internet, and we have, and we have wokeness, which is a complete redefinition of humanity in a fascinating, weird, sometimes scary way. But that's now we're really interesting. But if you look back at the history of the evolution of humankind, of Homo erectus, Homo whatever, 99% of it was really just waiting to get there, waiting to turn 18 so you can go drink, basically. It was really just, treading water. And so the thing is, when I look back then on history, on the origins of us and where we come from, I understand these guys who write kind of conspiracy theories, origin of mankind, like the Eric Danikins, the pyramids of the gods, right? Who invented the pyramids? Well, primitive man could not have invented the pyramids. We need aliens. So the aliens come down and invent the pyramids. So aliens come down in these spaceships, which, arguably have a lot of technology in them. And what they do is they build stones built up on. That's all the technology was good for, to put one stone on top of the other. I kind of doubt that. That seems like aliens. If aliens came to Earth, they would have done more than just build the pyramids. But okay, but that fascinates us, these stories. And there's a popular series now on Netflix. I think it's called Ancient Archaeology. I don't know, where he posits that it's the same thing as Denikin. He posits that there was some kind of visits from aliens that told us how to do things, and ancient civilizations were much more advanced than we thought they are. And of course, it has been rightly said that a lot of this. A lot of these ideas of ancient archaeology being invented by aliens or having some kind of superior advanced culture goes back to a lot of ideas that the Nazis use, goes back to Blavatsky and these early New Age ideas, where there is some place in New Scandinavia or New Schwabenland in the north somewhere, where a spaceship landed, and Northmen, and they were the perfect man, and they were big, but then they were probably subverted by Jews or something, and then they became us humans now, who are a lesser human being. But back then everything was better. Of course, back then nothing was better. I mean, seriously. And so there's this weird disconnect between, we know more or less, we know something about what happened before Homer. We understand that very little happened, between the apes learning to use tools and the Sumerians riding in chariots. But none of it was really interesting. So we invent things that are more interesting. And the aliens come to Earth, and they somehow disappear, which seems a weird thing to do for aliens, But that's what happened, apparently. And we invent these things, and that is the better story. And it's about storytelling. And that's what I'm saying. What I'm trying to say is that the story is the more interesting thing. The made-up, nonsensical, stupid story is more interesting than the truth, which is, we crawled out of the mud over millions of years and finally got to the point where we had an alphabet and we could write, a will. And that took millions of years. And that is the boring story. But the interesting story is, when Hilary Clinton is standing there and talking, and then her face starts to melt and her face comes off, and underneath as the face comes off, we see the lizard man underneath. And she's really a lizard man living underneath the earth, and she's controlling humanity. And she grabs her face and she says, "Oh, no one look, this is, I can explain this. This is the one, it's nothing. You're not, whatever you saying, don't even think about it." She puts her face back on. That's the more interesting story. The lizard man, the flat earth, the aliens coming and building our pyramids for us. That's the interesting story. And I gotta say, they're right. It is more interesting. It's more interesting than watching apes over millions of years not figuring out how to turn a tool, a poking tool, a branch that they poke into the anthill so the ants crawl onto the branch so that they can eat the ants. Go from that tool to an axe. It took them 1,000,000 years to get from that thing to and that is boring history. But the lizard man is interesting history. It's the better story. Oh, man. I like conspiracy theories. I like even the flat earth theory. It's so bizarre that it's great, because it's there's a disc. The world is a disc, a flat disc, and it's surrounded by ice. So there's ice on the edge of the world. There's these ice mountains, And so if that's true, all you have to do is go to the ice mountains and climb over them and look over the edge. And that's fascinating. That's a good story. It's better than going to the moon and not finding anything there. And I remember, and I'm that age. When was the when was the moon landing? I think it was 69. So I would have been 9 years old. I was born in 1960, so I would have been 9 years old if I'm getting these dates right. But I do remember watching it on TV. The whole family was there in front of the TV, black and white TV. They were pasted to it. They were, oh my God, look! And I kind of walked around and said, "What's going on?" And they said, "The moon landing," and I watched it and as I was watching it, I was disappointed because at 9 years old, I was old enough to read stories, or not read stories, but watch, TV. I think even Star Trek was already on by then, and know about, these spaceship stories, these, science fiction, the creature of the Black Lagoon coming in, and so I was old enough to know about space adventure, space opera stories where the hero has a ray gun and shoots the alien. But I wasn't old enough to understand what a great achievement it was to land on the moon. I didn't get that at all. And so I stood there and they landed on the moon and no aliens came out. And even if aliens did come out, they weren't prepared for it because they did not have guns. And so I thought, why are we sitting here watching this? This is the boring part. This is really boring. Now that I'm older, of course, I understand what happened and what that means for humanity, that we achieved that. But back then, I thought it was boring. And the little Eric, the 9-year-old Eric, was right. There's truth about humanity, which is often scary and horrifying, but most often it's really boring. Most of our lives is sleeping, eating, going to work. And that's really boring. And the exciting part is the stories we tell. So if there's anyone out there trying to write stories, trying to invent stories that we can tell ourselves to make our lives stand out and be more than just this great ape trying to turn the ant stick into a plow stick for millions of years until he finally makes it. If you're doing that, that's a great thing that you're doing. It's the great apes would be jealous of you and would look at you as if you were some kind of god or lizard man or something. Okay. Saturday night. Have a good weekend, everyone. Have a good Sunday. Have a good week next week. Good night.